Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to another installment of the Healing Brothers podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Brandon Jones, and I'm with the legendary Sam Simmons. How are you doing today, Sam?
I'm I'm gonna say I'm good. I don't want to be the grouchy grim reaper as I'm usually on other Sundays because it is Sunday. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm good. You know, not much has changed. So I'm good. You know, um, working it through. You know, yeah. You know, reacting or paying attention to the reaction or response to our recent election. You know,
Yeah.
you know, you know, it's been interesting. The reaction has been different, especially when we talk about
Mm-hmm.
the north side. I've been
Mm-hmm.
getting reports that folks are who weren't happy about the outcomes are attacking people, calling them out their names and stuff like that, and
Mm-hmm.
and as we mentioned and talked about, the ironic part is both sides wanted the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm
And that
saying?
was what? What was that? What they both want?
Well, I think they both. I don't think either one of them wanted to get rid of police
Right.
specifically.
Right.
They just wanted to have changes, and I can see the folks who wanted everybody to say yes to putting together a department of community safety. Uh, who felt like they needed to do something uh, drastic because we've been talking about reforming police for years,
Right.
right?
Right.
And haven't seen a response to that, right? And so that's what they wanted. It's like it's one thing to have police, but the other side is that having police who respects the people that they're supposed to be assisting or supposed to keep safe. And then the other side, they want to be safe there because if you looked at the map on because people who are listening who are not from Minnesota, we had the question too about you know coming up with this new department of community safety in place of in place of the police department, solely the police department. uh and the problem, and so the thing is what people heard was you getting ready to do an experiment, and then you didn't guarantee there was going to be police. And we're already having issues with not having enough police. We have an increased um in crime and violence here as well in other cities around the country. And so I think the people on the other side, when you look at the map of who voted for it, those folks were located where most of the violence has been occurring. So the ones who said yes living in suburbs, and the majority of them who said yes were white as well. At least that's the way it's looking, right? So uh and some people are like surprised that black folks in particular, people of color, black folks in particular, voted no, since we've had this rocky experience with police for over 150 years, right? So but what it all boils down to, people want the same thing. They want to be safe, and they want to be respected by the so-called people who's supposed to help them maintain their safety. So, I'm hoping in the coming weeks or so that both sides come together and work together to put the pressure on the mayor who was reelected, who was given increased power, who wanted increased power. Now he got it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you got to put the pressure on him, and it's easier to put the pressure on them together than it is going to be putting the pressure on, trying to put pressure on somebody when you fighting. I mean, we got a prime example of that. The same thing in the Democratic Party. If you want to put pressure on somebody, you can't put a pressure on folks when the folks in your party fighting all the time.
Right.
So it's the same thing. So
Right. So yeah, there more of what we already had, but hopefully with some new ideas and some new strategies to improve what's already been going on. And I thought it was a lot closer than it than well, I didn't think it was going to be as close in the voting as it actually turned out, as far as voting to reform the police department or not. I thought that the results actually ended up a lot closer,
yes.
especially without if we did vote to reform the police, there wasn't a really distinct plan. So that also had me a little concerned. It's like, okay, we got to change this, but we don't really know what it's going to look like just yet.
Well, that's probably the
It's
piece
like,
that threw it.
damn.
That
Now,
was the
if
part.
they knew, yeah, and if they knew, it probably would have passed actually
Yeah,
with a solid plan.
or if they would have said clearly the police would be part of, and they put in there the police may be part of the plan.
Yeah, they were like third level in that
Yeah,
chart. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah,
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 yeah. So, yeah, it would have passed because it was like what, maybe
it was like
5%, 6,
I
seven
think it
percent.
was 50. It was almost, yeah. It was like 53-47. It was real
Right,
close, man. I
right,
was like, damn.
right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because even when I went to vote, I was still up in the air. I didn't make the
yeah,
decision till I got in the booth,
yeah,
right? Because I understood both sides, right?
yeah.
And one of the things, we did a show on Friday, and we had a former senator come on, and he said the big piece is, he says, when you're doing a yes or no vote in this kind of situation, it becomes complicated because nobody's really all yes or all no
Right,
in this particular topic,
right.
right? There's more nuance than that, right? And nuance don't seem to be part of the conversation in any of
Mm-mm.
the things going on in our country right now. So
No, no, it's got to be very clear cut. There's not a lot of space. There's not a lot of gray space in decision making at this point.
no, and there's not a lot of gray space in people's ability to hear each other either. So
But that I think that's kind of the culture that we have right now. Like, if you have opposing, there's a dominant viewpoint and talking point, and then there's alternatives. And if you're part of alternatives, you are being weeded out. Like you are, and then some, depending on your point, you might be attacked. And that's very fascinating too. So we have people who are afraid to even speak out
well,
about
the other thing
things.
is that what's going on, if you're the louder opposing voice, you don't have to be the largest opposing voice, right? You just got to be the
Mhm,
louder opposing voice. You know what I'm saying?
mhm.
And that's the deal. The louder, the more out there, the more ridiculous you are, the more I guess you would say, get press
Yeah.
or
Yep.
whatever.
Yep. You get
You know,
pressed. Yeah.
so yeah, so it ain't even the majority voice in a lot of cases.
Mm-mm.
So
Yeah. And we got to be honest too. Right now, with no plan, trying to reform police is not good because it is crazy out here right now. We are seeing some stuff that I know in my lifetime I haven't seen. I can't speak for the Murderapolis times and how it was in the 90s or even in the late 80s. I can't speak towards that because I wasn't even old enough to realize what was going on. But man, this is like, it's wild out here. Carjackings are through the roof. I think I say the same thing every week. Carjackings are through the roof. We got shootings all over the place. Like, people are really out here bad, and it seems like no one knows really what to do. Even myself, I don't even know what to do. So, what do you think's happening? What do you think is taking place? Where we're seeing across the nation. This is not just Twin Cities, related, but across the nation in these urban environments, we're just seeing so much trauma and violence and aggressive things, and it doesn't take much. I mean, it's literally like you cut me over in in traffic, um or I bumped into you, and next thing you know, my life could be over. Like, what do you think's happening?
well, the thing is we see it more in urban areas, but it's not just urban areas. There's a certain attitude there's a certain selfishness that came after the lockdown, and I'm not
Mm,
solely wondering what that is, but there's this certain selfishness. I think a certain selfishness, a certain fatalism that people have. It's almost like people having too much time to themselves wasn't good,
mm,
right? And I think it, I think the pandemic and the way it was dealt with, and what we had to do, um, when you're dealing with a community that wasn't, overall folks who, when we think about how we functioned a lot on show and tell than reality. Even before the pandemic, we came out of that, with I think it scared people, you know, and every man is for himself, right? And you're not going to tell me what to do, and 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 it really dug up emotions that became weren't are not contained anymore, right? I mean, we got the situation that just happened in Houston at the uh uh what was it? E-
Astro World Concert Festival.
right.
Travis Scott.
and and what I've been hearing from people who have been to those kind of festivals, they
Mhm,
said, yeah, we've had issues in the past, but like one woman said, I ain't never seen a crowd be so aggressive, right?
mhm,
In the manner they came in aggressive, bum rushing
mhm,
the entry points, right?
mhm,
Bum rushing the VIP points, because it appears that where it really got bad was the VIP was was there. You could see, if you look real closely, there was like railings for the VIP section, which was closer to the stage,
mhm,
that had been bum rushed. So there was more people in that VIP section that was supposed to be in that section.
mhm,
So you had all these people crushed together, who bum rushed themselves in. They were going over fences, and they really talk about how aggressive the crowd was. And one woman said, I've been to these kind of festivals. People go to festivals because they're usually, you know, free flowing. People help each other and that kind of stuff. And she says, I never seen nothing like this before, where folks was like they wasn't helping each other. They were highly aggressive and that kind of thing. And she basically said, I don't know what they could have done differently, other than have what several thousand guards or whatever. And we're talking about 50,000 people, right? And so, um, that aggression that has come out or starts being shown, like you're saying, just being cut off, on the road could get you killed, right? And that's not just the urban areas, right?
right.
uh Aggressive behavior in the suburban areas here, where you get on TikTok and it says destroy the bathrooms at the schools,
Yeah,
right?
devious licks. Yeah.
Right. You know, so yeah, there's definitely something going on around that impatience for others, aggression, that kind of thing. And I think a lot of it had to do with folks being afraid, and then you have folks who are already didn't believing wasn't believing our government, because the thing is we have allowed certain things to go on so long unchecked that where this came to a head, and some of it can be seen as good in terms of trying to make change, and then some of it is like all hell break loose, right? I don't, all of the negativity and the feelings that folks had going in seem to come more to the surface.
Mhm,
It might sound like I'm talking in circles, but that's what I'm seeing. you
yeah.
know um so I believe that some of this stuff was there, it
Yeah.
just was brought out,
Yeah.
right? And again, it comes from when you ignore something so long is going to definitely puss up and start draining, and it's
Yeah.
draining heavily, you
Mm.
know, and that's just the bigger picture. If we narrow it down, I mean, the thing, and some of the stuff that we're seeing actually existed. We just didn't talk about it,
Mm.
right? I believe, right? Like we're starting to hear more and more situations where you have young people commit crimes and have their parent, particularly fathers, come up behind them
Man.
and and
Yeah.
and and,
Yeah.
and
Assist with
assist.
a crime. Yeah.
Yeah,
They're accessories to murder.
right,
And we've seen like 3 of these in the last 2.5 months or so. Well, I have just locally. So
right.
so I can assume based on that this is taking place across the nation. So we had the very high profile murder of the 4 people that were found in Wisconsin. And the shooter's father from that was one of the people that helped him drive the bodies to Wisconsin. And then we had another case that got solved, um, where they had a father who he helped cover up the murder. He didn't move the bodies or anything this time, but he helped assist the son to get away. And this was in St. Paul. And then just I think today or yesterday, there was another case that was solved around a 14-year-old boy that was shot. His father was an associate to murder as well, because he helped his son who was 18, 19. um uh what did he help with? He was the no he drove his son to so this is wild. So this 14-year-old boy was bullying one of the shooter sons was his brother. He was bullying the brother. So the dad said, well, you need to do something about it. You need to shoot this kid. So the dad drives the 17, 18, 19-year-old kid. He's in his high teens to go shoot this kid. They shoot him, 14-year-old kid, and then they drive away. Minneapolis.
So that's what happened, huh?
That's what happened. I was like, man, like this is where we're at. The parents are the getaway drivers. What I mean, and it's all fathers too. That let's be very specific. We're seeing fathers, but let's not get it misconstrued, because I've seen stories where the moms have drove the girls to fight and like you better get her, or they jumped in and helped out. Like we're seeing this. There's something happening here. There's
Well,
something
but
going on
see,
where the parents are getting wrapped up in the violence with their children.
but again, how is that different, Brandon? That when you have violence in the community, right? And as we both got to admit, there was violence in communities around the country that was at a level that was epidemic even before um
Yes, the
COVID,
pandemic. Yes,
right?
I can agree with that.
Okay. And in those communities, you're not solving the cases. Don't you realize there's parents who are involved with covering that stuff up or not saying anything?
Absolutely, I think that goes into no snitching culture. People hear things and they know when
Well, it's
people are involved and stuff.
yeah, well, it's even deeper than no snitching culture. It's
Okay.
it's it's blood is thicker than water. Is based in that whole deep seated survival kind of pieces. It's been around for a long time, but it's became even more major over the last 40 years because we just been riding past uh, the major trauma and the major violence in communities and I keep saying it, around the crack era, right?
Mhm.
And we know that some of those folks that are in some of these adults are around the age I talk about,
Mhm.
47,
Mhm.
between 40 and 50 years old,
Yeah, they were teens during the crack era.
right?
Mm.
Okay.
Wow.
Adults didn't care nothing about us, but I'm gonna be there for mine no matter what.
Mm. That reminds me of a story. I seen this before the pandemic, and I'll never forget this. I wish I saved the clip, man, because it was just so shocking to hear this. But there was a mom who was interviewed by the news. Her son had got caught shooting at someone, and she said, "I told my baby he better bust back. If whatever happens, he better bust back." That's what she. Now this is like a 14-year-old though, and it stood out to me. And I don't remember what city. It wasn't local. I don't remember what city it was, but I remember seeing it. I'm like, wow, like this mother is really saying, no matter what happens, my son better shoot back. At 14 years old, he's a ninth grader. I was like, damn. I remember when I was younger. I remember one of the. It wasn't the first fight I got into, but a fight that I got into with some neighborhood kids. And I remember my mom telling me like, well, no matter what happens, don't come back into the house unless you fight back. Like it was just like a thing of defend yourself. Don't just get punked and run back in the house crying. Like you need to fight. And if your brother gets into anything, you need to fight for your brother too. Like because you're the oldest. Like I remember things like that. But I don't know if my mom would tell me this, but I don't think she would tell me that I better shoot back. Like they start shooting, shoot back. Like I don't know. I don't know. That just is wild to me.
Well, the thing is okay. So your response to that is if you don't have another additional response to that kind of experience, it always go when the violence change, but the response is the
It's the
same.
same. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. You get a more drastic result, but the intent is the same.
It's the same.
Yeah.
And and the whole thing about that, think about
Mhm.
I understand. And see, the thing is one of the things I try to do when I talk about this kind of stuff, because people want to all or nothing, and then they want to
Mhm.
judge people and that kind of stuff. I understand that response, right?
Mhm.
Coming in the communities we grew up with, right? That's that whole thing about when they started having this conversation about bullying in the country, and the faces of the people being bullied were white, right? And when they came up with the bullying laws, you know, uh black folks didn't comprehend those bullying laws. I don't even know if they thought they included them or not, right? But basically, if your response to a bully was to beat the bully down, right, or get beat down fighting the bully so that you can get their respect, right? Over time, for some kids, it's better to be the bully, right, than to be bullied. Especially, you see this a lot with boys, and so these were survival techniques of an environment and of a people who were tired of being bullied as a people. And I know people don't always connect those dots, but the thing is um, think about being a child, and because I was that child, okay, um, who used to get bullied, and I was told I couldn't come home, right? I couldn't come home and be a child and be nurtured, right? And I understood you don't want to be running all your life, but the thing is, how do you balance that? And that's the biggest thing about addressing trauma responses. How do we balance all the emotions that are involved when you don't have those skills? I don't know if that makes any sense, but it really comes down to that, right? Um, 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 so now, I'm not only am I scared to go outside, I'm scared to go home, and now I'm carrying a baseball bat to harm another child, so I can go home, and there's something about that ain't okay, even if I do understand it. I can't hear you.
Let's take some time to dissect what emotions or situations have kind of bubbled this stuff up because we said it's been there, right? It's been kind of just surfacing, but the pandemic has made it rise to a level of concern, I would say. Do you think that it's grief that people are dealing with? We obviously know that trauma plays a role in it. Is this anger? Is it an emotional thing, or is this just people's nature? Is this just who they are? Like, is this a software problem or a hardware problem? Ultimately, is what I'm asking. Like, what do you think has has gotten this angst and this anxiety and this rage to kind of rise to this level that it's at?
Well, the thing is I believe it was there already.
Right. It's
Okay.
unleashed.
Right. It's just unleashed. And but the other piece is the pandemic made things clear that we always thought. The system don't care nothing about folks, right? This, and only certain groups of people care, right? That's the way it felt, right? Um, um, and every man out is out for himself.
All right. Yeah, it's the Wild Wild West now.
Right. And then we're paying more attention to it because we're all locked down. A lot of this stuff, it's just like George Floyd. Do you think that if we went on a lockdown that we would have had the response to George Floyd that we had?
No, I
Hell
do
no.
not at all.
No. So
I mean, we got proof of that now. We had
right.
George Floyd's happen right now. Ain't nobody saying nothing.
Right. So that containment, it's like, it's like being living around shit, and now you contained in shit. You ain't got no way to wipe it off. It's all like that, and it's like, oh my God. And people will come out of that, right? So you had people who came out of it who were scared. Some people came out of it with surprised. It's like, it's like the disparities, or the health disparities, or the housing disparities, or the poverty disparities that always exist, that we've been talking about in the news media, and we supposedly spend money on, and people who even work in nonprofits and in systems all of a sudden are surprised. What the hell were you doing if you're surprised? What is that, right?
Yeah.
And so so that there was so much reality, and maybe some not so real, but realities that was thrown upon us all at once because of this pandemic, that opened up the can, just snatched that scar off the sewer of what was going on in America, the lies, and the true disparities, that you had people come out, and then you had people who were so appalled and so hurt that they wanted to do something about it, and then we end up with other extremes, right? Our extreme responses, and now we got people, different factions, even factions within politics. People want to talk about the woke crowd need to shut up. What do you mean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting who's saying that the loudest. Old white men. Mm. And what are you including in all of that? Okay, now that people want to speak up and say, you can't treat us like this anymore, is it over the top in terms of the cancel culture and all that? Absolutely. That's what happens with change, right? The pendulum swings one way too far, and hopefully you get it closer to the middle. You just can't disregard that certain people in our country have not felt included in this thing we call the American dream at the level they deserve.
Right.
And so now so emotionally, it's either be depressed or every man for himself. And then the folks in the middle who are trying to do this thing with some conscience and with some thought are overwhelmed because there's so much, right? And And if we narrow it down to our community, that's the same thing, right? And so you got in our community around the violence, you know, we know that there's groups who say the violence that we see is a result of poverty and all like that. And I do believe that that's a piece of that, but you know, poor does not necessarily equal violence.
Yep. And yeah, we see that all around the country.
Right.
There's poor
Right.
communities. I mean, even in the state, there's super poor towns and communities where the violence is nowhere near what it is
Right.
in the
Eh,
urban settings.
Yeah, but again, when you get to a point where every man's for himself, and this might be a little weird too, but I think emotionally people were already depressed, so it takes more to stimulate them at their life. And part of that gets down to doing things for entertainment that they don't give a damn that hurts other people. Think about the carjacking. Think about the carjackings. Back in the day, when I was growing up, when a car got stolen, that's what we called it, stealing cars.
Yeah.
Now the carjacking becomes the fact that a person is in the car when they're taking it, right? That's when it becomes carjacking. Do you understand that maybe, I don't know exact the number, I know it's like over 70% of those cars end up back at to their owners?
Back then?
No, now.
Or now? Okay.
Oh, back then, no, you wouldn't get your car back in the day.
Be at the chop shop?
Yeah, be at the chop shop. Or they done changed the stuff and, you know, the numbers and stuff and sent it to another state or whatever, right? It was there was a mission, right? You carjacking folks, using the car to carjack other folks, the joyride and the excitement of even doing it, and getting off on people being afraid of you. Wow. Because you have no power. Your power is in terrorism.
Jeez.
And so the thing is because that is hard for us to comprehend. We got young people at that state. We don't want to make the tough choices that we're gonna have to make. There's gonna be some real tough. There was tough choices we needed to make within the community way before now. Now we at a point where we don't really have a lot of choices if we're going to survive, right? If we're going to survive, and some of them tough choices are choices that we call white people choices. Okay.
Do you have an example?
Like people going to jail.
Yeah, and keeping them there.
Well, the thing is I would do you when you say keeping them there. I'm not fully on board with that. It's about how you keep them there.
Okay.
And, because when you're just warehousing people, especially young folks, you're making bigger monsters.
Yeah, and that's what we see.
Right.
We get more. It's like I've heard you say this before, and I completely agree with it. That the jails have become like battlefield training grounds or something you termed it before. It's
right.
Like warrior camp. It's like,
right.
God dang.
And especially when you're sending them so young, right? Granted that the trauma, the bad part about it, the trauma they experience out here in the world is so overwhelming. The trauma in jail for some of them is less.
Yeah. There's more stability and structure, even knowing they still have to fight for survival. They don't have to worry about where they need to sleep. They don't have to worry about where their meal's gonna come from. They gotta just be able to click up, fight their way through things, and find some entertainment.
And figure out a way to navigate that space. That's a smaller space to navigate. Might be used to be a more dangerous space to navigate, right, than being out here in the street. But that's not even true no more. Right. And see, and that's a result of all of this incarceration, unnecessary incarceration of people, and unnecessary incarceration of young people, right? We know that like in the 80s, because of the high level of incarceration and how they were about incarcerating people, not giving them no education. Because in some states they canceled out education because the good natured people, and I'm not going to get into too deep who the good natured people is at this point, decided that prisoners shouldn't get an education because their kids wasn't getting a free education. So there were states that cut education out, right? So you lock up all these men, adult men, then you start locking up their boys, their nephews, right? And then what did you start seeing in the 90s? What you seen if you went to a prison, and I used to go to prisons, right? The dress style, the way you carried yourself in prison showed up in the damn community.
Yeah,
identical.
There's a spillover,
a major spillover,
and not just the dress, Sam. The language,
right,
which is one of the vehicles of culture. The lingo spilled out of the prisons into the community. People don't think about that.
Right.
That's significant.
Right. The saggy draws and all the other kind of stuff, because folks ain't wearing belts and stuff, right? And then with our homophobia, we want to talk about, well, that was a way for them to show that they was down. You ain't got no belts, okay? And everybody, and here in Minnesota, you didn't wear prison stripes because that cost too much money. So you got people in jeans with elastic bands on them and T-shirts. Okay. What did we see in the neighborhood? The same thing. Then we had two different factions, and again, like in the community, two different factions of hip hop that came out, right?
Yeah.
And so one faction of hip hop represented the voice of the street and the voice of the jail, right? And what one at times took over the others, because people get mad when you start talking about hip hop, but hip hop was part conscious and part reactionary, right? And so so you had conscious lyrics to let folks know what was going on because they could hear it and that kind of stuff. And then you had the other piece about the hard side of the street, and when you got people who are emotionally numb, emotionally not stable, what you hear in music becomes your life. That's why you can have hundreds of thousands of white kids listen to hip hop and not have the same response, because they know that's not their life.
Yeah, it's entertainment.
Yeah,
it's like watching a horror movie or The Sopranos or something.
Right.
It's just there for my entertainment.
Right. And so our response to everything is all or nothing. Oh, well, look at the hip hop is doing. Who is it really affecting? It's affecting folks who are not being nurtured. It's affecting folks who are, because even black kids who know the difference, right? Who go to college, they still listen to hip hop, but they getting their diplomas. They're going to jobs and that kind of stuff. But when you ain't got nothing else but that, on that, this almost validates your trauma.
Right.
And you get this and becomes part of your trauma response. Right. I mean, because the thing is when you don't when you can't separate the two, it becomes blurred. I might get in trouble for this, but I look at a person like Tupac, brilliant, brilliant lyricist, but he was not able to break away from his trauma, and his trauma caught up with him. And we see that all the time. So it's a tough one. It's really a tough one. And ignoring trauma, ignoring what's going on in the community, and a lot of times what was going on in the community, we were so busy fighting systems, rightfully so, that we didn't even feel like we had time to deal with what's going on in the community. We just got to ride that through, right? And we got to nurture our kids. Well, that's fine, but how are you nurturing them?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you don't want them to feel bad for making bad choices. Sometimes you need to feel bad for making bad choices, so you don't make them again. You don't make a narrative around bad choices to make it normal.
Yeah.
And our way of survival, that's some of what we've done. When you a community that's been beat down so much and be called, and everything you do is called negative when you do it, and when the mainstream community do it, it is a style, it's a culture, right? And how do you sort all that out? But again, I mentioned that I believe that there's a portion of the population, and it's not just ours, it just shows up differently, that were depressed at a depressed state emotionally, which was their normal, which means that I have to have much more stimulus than just the regular stimulus of happiness, that even if it any means necessary. Feeling good any means. I mean, because it comes down to the whole idea around sex, how that's done. All these things done took a whole nother level of craziness for folks to make it okay, right? And some of us emotionally have been able to ride that through without too much harm, but there's a lot of us who haven't.
Have not at all. Yeah.
No. And we got to do. Two things can be true at the same time. I was thinking about something, and I get tired of thinking about about Minneapolis. Minneapolis is, they always call, you remember they used to make the joke about mini Apple,
Yeah,
in
the
terms of
mini apple.
compared
Yeah.
to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Minneapolis is turning into that, right? Because if
Yeah.
you go to New York, different communities have their own community, right? That same thing is happening here in Minneapolis.
Yeah. Chinatown, Koreatown,
Right.
where the Jewish folks stay. Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And those other communities, a lot of times, and you've seen it also show up in Virginia, okay, are voting against what black folks think is in their best interest, because it ain't their interest. I mean, and it ain't about a good or bad thing, because I'm all for it, right? But the thing is, they're talking about a lot of Latinas, especially new immigrants, black, brown immigrants, have a tendency to lean towards Republicans, right? And because their experience is different, right? Their ideals are different. They come here with a different idea, right? And so even though we talk about people of color and those kind of things, people have their own best interests in mind. And if I come here and believe that hard work gonna get me what I want and that kind of stuff, and if I'm highly religious, we know that portions of the Latina community is very religious and that kind of stuff. They're not interested in things that other folks are interested in, like abortion, and even some of us are not interested in that kind of stuff, right? Or are not interested in having conversations about race, not the
Right.
way we want to.
Right.
And I think sometimes as black folks, we got to keep that in mind, that our really and put our arms around how unique our experience is, including how unique our experience with trauma is in America, to really come to an answer to do better. Put our arms around it. As uncomfortable as it is, put our arms around it. That is showing up. And we can't afford to continue to do that. Not to put our arms around it to get a handle on it. You cannot get a handle on shit that you deny.
Yeah. When you say put your arms around it. Does part of that hugging of the reality include being accountable for what you can change?
Yes, because the thing is if I deny that my experience here in America historically, even though it didn't happen to you personally, if it happened, if you're part of that's part of your history, that's part of your family's history. The fact that your whole existence as a people has been struggling with a society to say I'm okay, I am human. Let me show you,
Mm-hmm.
and I got to put all this extra effort into showing you that I'm okay, right? Put this extra effort in to say, yeah, I'm black, but I'm human, right? Put this extra effort, that all that extra effort we talk about, right? And you put the extra effort in, but you still catching hell, right? And and as a human being, that's bound to have an effect on you emotionally, no matter how emotionally strong you think the hell you are, right? And there's an effect to that. That affects people. That affects how we raise our children. That affects how we see ourselves in the world, right? If we put our arms around that effect and say this has affected us because we are human, and start looking at the negative and the positive, because we always want to talk about the positive. We're strong, but we're delusional at the same time. We make up shit about our community, how close our community is. It ain't always worked out that way for me, and it ain't always worked out that way for other black folks. But
Yeah.
but one thing is, we try to be loyal to our people, even when it's painful. We try to be loyal to our people, right? Blindfoldly loyal, to the point that we become bitter towards our own people. It's like, I can't believe the black folks did me that. Why? Why you can't believe that? People in your own family been doing you that way. Our reactionary kind of response to the world is actually can be contributed or back to our trauma, right? And even a lot of our things we call culture are a response to the trauma. Again, both positive, but we always want to shun the negative because we don't want people to think that there's something wrong with us, because we've been trying to tell folks there's nothing wrong with us, to the point where when there's something wrong, we don't know how to handle it.
Right. And it goes back to your earlier point that not only is something, your earlier point, you said that two things can be right at the same time. And I think one of the things that gets lost in these conversations about the community healing and moving forward is that, yes, something has happened to us, but something's also wrong with us at the same time.
Because of
Those
that.
two statements can be true
Right.
at the same time. And in order for us to move forward, we have to acknowledge that and accept it. It's okay.
Right. And it's okay because it ain't our fault. I mean, when I say it ain't our fault, I'm saying that it's accumulation of this struggle that we shouldn't have had as human beings. We should not had to go through, right? Where where we've been demeaned in such a level, and it's so ingrained in our culture, our full American culture, that it feels like we can't escape it, right? But folks who get a handle on that, right? You get a handle on that, and and the outcomes of that, you can fix it. It's painful, but you can fix it. But you can't get a handle on something you refuse to put an arm around, right? If I'd rather just talk about the who I see as the perpetrator go on with their life, right? They go on with their life, especially when they don't believe they're a perpetrator. You spending so much time trying to get people to be convinced that they're a perpetrator, that it's like, how about put some of that's fine if you can do that and do it and articulate it, because we need all of it. We need all the above. But the piece that is missing in my view is a larger piece around this stuff. It's like when we do this ACEs stuff, right? The whole thing about there's nothing wrong with it if something happened to us, right?
Right.
It's that simple. Something happened to us.
Right.
And because of what happened to us has affected how we deal with each other relationally, majorly in our relational kind of things, right? You're trying to be in relations, and you can't even trust the person next to you. And so then when you can't trust the people next to you, you feel bad about that, and then you try to double down to make yourself trust them. It's like, whoa. And that's why we have difficulties with forgiveness and all these other kind of pieces that are natural as being human beings. I can't forgive because I just know you're going to do it again. Well, yeah, I'm going to do it again if I'm triggered. Yes, I am.
And it doesn't take much to trigger people, right?
No.
For people to get activated, because and this is something I've been wrestling with over the past, probably since the pandemic started. Is I feel like people have gotten to a place and space where how they say that anger is a secondary emotion.
Right.
I feel like for Black folks, that's not true. I feel like it's already there because we've accumulated so much trauma and stress, and we dealt with so much that it don't take much for us to take it to that next level because we don't need to process through anything. There's no filter for that to even be true.
Right. Well, we got so much things we believe we got to be angry about.
Exactly.
Okay.
Damn.
Okay. I mean, and when people say, well, you're just being paranoid. No, it ain't paranoia when it's true. Right. And then when we talk about relations, right? When we talk about trying to function as family and trying to function and at the same time trying to be family and having a system that every turn there's something to disrupt that family throughout our history, right? And again, I say the last major blow to family, people want to say welfare. That probably was the beginning. Again, there's a way to respond to that, right? Okay. When you when you respond to welfare as a way to survive, that's a trauma response too, right? Because people get tired of struggling. And for some of us, that was a way to struggle less, right? But I think the last major blow to family was the major blow to family, and it's continuing, it ain't stopped, is the crack era, because it had such a major effect on women and children. And now men are just outlaws. We're trying to find our way so bad. And the ironic part, when we're dealing with our trauma and our trauma show out, if you look at what's going on in the community, we have a tendency when our trauma gets overwhelming to lash out at each other.
Right.
And you're going to do that if you do not put a handle around this trauma has affected me. How do I deal with that? What part do I play? Right? I have learned that when you get people to think about cut all that other stuff out, it's like, I got a brand new men's group. They're younger. And they come in the group. All they want to do is talk about white people. This ain't the group, dude. Just because there's all Black men in here, this is not let's talk about what white people do. This is about you. It's about what you can do better. It's about understanding you got more control than you give yourself credit for if you address the trauma. And the ones who get it at the end of the program, they do well in the long run. Now, are they still pissed off dealing with white folks? Yeah. But they are not taking it out on themselves, and they're not taking it out on each other. Right? And so that's what I mean about putting your arms around the full truth, not the portions that you're comfortable with. It's no different than these crazy white folks talking about they don't want to deal with race and stuff in the community. Their own little trauma, being part of that whole class, right? I can't put my arms around the full truth because it makes me uncomfortable. The hell with that.
You better sit in that discomfort and do the work.
Right. and see, the problem with us is we've been sitting in discomfort so long we can't sort the shit out.
We don't know that it's discomfort. It's just our baseline.
Right.
And I hate to laugh at it, but it's so when you remove yourself from it and you can and you bring your awareness to it, it's so obvious. But then when you see people just functioning and not aware, it's kind of depressing, man.
Yes, it is.
It hurts.
Yeah.
And you get hopeless very quickly because it's like people don't even realize how deep this is and how this is holding them back from being in a better position than what they're in. But it's hard to know. It's hard to do better when you don't know anything different.
Yeah, but
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say quickly, and it's hard for you to know that there's something better when you've been conditioned to just accept what you have, nothing else. That's the crazy part.
And it's harder to know better when you want to continually attack folks who
try to help you. That's it, man.
So I don't know, man. I don't know what you see. You done probably got me in trouble because some of the stuff
we both in trouble. If I got you in trouble, we both.
Oh well, see, what's funny about that? They'll let you off the hook. They'll write you off as being young, and they'll say I'm supposed to know better, right? And we know that there's a whole lot of so-called elders out there who still talking that dumb shit. So, old don't make you know better. Yeah, I said it.
But you supposed to respect your elders, Sam.
Yeah.
Our elders do no wrong.
Yeah.
They have no responsibility in any of this. It's the young, misguided millennials.
Yeah, I respect people who respect themselves.
Oh. Ouch.
It's like, I'm respected just because I'm honest and I'm fair, and I might not say I say stuff to people who might not like it, but them same people respect me because I'm consistent, and when I'm wrong, right? Unfortunately, for some of this stuff, I'm not wrong, and that's the hard part when you dealing with somebody who is like, you know what, that makes sense. So how you want to sum this up? Because it's like I don't know if our people who watch this, I don't know, I don't know. But
I think go ahead. But that what? Go ahead.
No, that putting your arms around it is where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
It's like why my question is, why do Black people deny their trauma? Is my last question. I want people to think about that.
Cool. I have an answer that I'm not going to say on air, but yeah, that's a great question. I think that's a great place to end, is why do we deny our trauma? And my fear is, I'll give you part of my answer. My fear is one of the reasons why we deny it, because if we acknowledge it, we don't know what comes after. And that's scary.
Yes, absolutely. That all goes along with the fear of healing.
And we got to heal. So on that note, we're going to wrap up this week's episode of the Healing Brothers podcast. We hope that you're doing the best that you can be doing at these times. And we encourage you to share this podcast with others. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Healing Brothers on YouTube. You can just type in Healing Brothers podcast on YouTube and find us. Be sure to share it on Facebook and look for us next week at 3 p.m. Central Time. We will see you then. Please take care, be safe, and we're out. Peace.